State Treasurer Sarah Godlewski, thank you for joining us on Up North News.
Well, thanks for having me, Pat. It's great to be here.
Let's talk first about the decision to run for Senate. Obviously, it's a ways to go until the election, but candidates are starting to line up now for a host of reasons. Why did you feel like this is the appropriate time to get involved in a race that is truly going to be a marathon rather than a sprint?
Yeah, there were a couple of reasons, Pat. I mean, for starters, it's been, as a fifth generation Wisconsinite and somebody who was born and raised in Eau Claire, I was just watching Wisconsinites struggle. Many of them were underemployed and unemployed through no fault of their own. And small businesses were doing everything they could, Pat, to keep their doors open. And Senator Ron Johnson is in Wisconsin, or is outside of Wisconsin, saying, oh, our people don't need any help. Things are just fine back home. I mean, Pat, he single-handedly delayed $1,400 checks. He tried to stop vaccinations from being expanded and even small businesses from getting money. And I'm like, this guy's clearly not connected with Wisconsin. But I don't know, Pat, the other thing I do have to add, I mean, I think we all also saw what happened on January 6th, where it was a domestic terrorist attack against our democracy. And he called it a peaceful protest. I mean, this guy's not even connected with reality. And I believe Wisconsinites deserve better. And I just can't sit on the sidelines, Pat. I've got to, I think between whether it's a small business owner or being a mom, that perspective couldn't be more different than Ron Johnson. And I think that's what working Wisconsinites want to represent them in Washington.
Let's talk then about that background, because we know that Ron Johnson cites his business background as a reason for him to run and to serve in the Senate. Let's talk about your background and what makes you a worthy candidate in the race and perhaps somebody's choice to be senator.
Well, for starters, I started my career at national security, Pat, and what I did was actually understand and identify wasteful spending. So whether it was in the Army to my time with the Secretary of Defense, we were identifying programs that were ineffective and how could we make them more funny and save our tax dollars. But it didn't end there. I then started my own small business, and we were really focused, Pat, on how can businesses also do good things for the community. So our mission was about purpose, looking at people, and then also looking at profitability and sustainability. And I think the business world doesn't do that enough. And I think that's quite frankly missing from Washington. And I will say the other job that I think I pointed out is I'm a mom. And that is a job within itself too, as we are all struggling with childcare and raising our kids and schools. So that's kind of a nutshell of what I've been doing for my career.
You mentioned the Pentagon and identifying ways to save taxpayer dollars. Can you talk a bit more about that to the degree that you're not revealing state secrets, of course, and what it is, the kinds of things that you were brought on to do and the kinds of things that you identified?
Yeah, so maybe there was a handful of things, but I think some of the two main programs were at the height of Afghanistan and Iraq, Pat, we were deploying equipment and troops 2-3 times. And we were oftentimes leaving equipment overseas. We were not effective in how we were training our soldiers. And so we redefined readiness. And that was a significant improvement in how things were being done previously. Because you can imagine when you leave equipment in the desert, that's not only expensive, but it leaves potentially an asset that the enemy can use against you. The other big project was looking at how we do language and culture. We were not effective in how we were thinking about, do we speak Pashto or Urdu? And we were actually buying that capability, which is not only expensive, we don't have the trust from people who aren't American necessarily. So these are just two of the many programs that I was supporting at my time at DoD.
It would seem that wise use of taxpayer dollars isn't just about making budget cuts, but about the way that the money is being spent. At least that's the way it often strikes a lot of swing voters. And Wisconsin is probably, ground zero when it comes to swing voters. With Wisconsin being the purple state that it is, I mean, you don't have to talk to the Democratic base, and Ron Johnson will talk to the Republican base. What is it that you think the swing voters of Wisconsin are really going to be looking to hear between now and November of 2022?
I think they're looking at economic security at the end of the day. I mean, look, Pat, we just got a recent report where we are one of the worst states for personal income growth. So that means over 30 plus states make more money than we do. And Wisconsinites deserve a quality of life, but they don't want to work 2 or 3 jobs. They don't want to be in the same stagnant wages. And so I think it's about how do we build economic security and how do we also protect jobs here? I mean, we were #1 in farm bankruptcies. We had lost thousands of manufacturing jobs because of Trump's trade wars, which Ron Johnson was leading in the Senate. And so he's not protecting Wisconsin jobs. He's not protecting Wisconsin companies. And that, I think, is a huge mistake and something that we need to be talking about, whether that is in downtown Milwaukee or rural Wisconsin.
Let's talk about some of the things that you will be asked about from a national standpoint with the Biden administration. Obviously, right now, the talk is about a proposed infrastructure bill, an American jobs plan. And while there's a lot of focus on the price tag, certainly a lot can be said about what should or shouldn't be in it that could help Wisconsin. Senator Johnson, no doubt, is already calling it just a grab bag and a wish list. What's your view of how that could best be structured for the state?
Well, I'm excited about this infrastructure package, Pat, for a couple of reasons. For starters, let's talk about broadband. We know over 20% of rural Wisconsin does not have solid broadband. And this package is building the infrastructure to make sure all of us have broadband, whether you're in rural Wisconsin or, again, in downtown Madison. And I think that's a big piece of it. I think the second piece goes to clean water. I mean, the fact that we're still having children drink from lead pipes is absolutely ridiculous. This is going to rebuild those infrastructure as far as removing those lead pipes and making sure we all drink clean water. And then I think the last piece that I really appreciate is the commitment to manufacturing, whether it is construction with roads and bridges to actually training our manufacturers to looking at renewable energy and how that can best fit our economy. So I could actually, Pat, go on about this package all day, but those are a few of my favorite things when I look at this.
When we look at the race ahead, there are already 4 announced Democratic candidates. Almost certainly will be more. It will look a lot like the gubernatorial primary that led into 2018. A lot of candidates, but a lot of people think that part of the reason it ended successfully for the eventual Democratic nominee, Tony Evers, was that the Democratic primary contenders kept things above board. There was very, very little in the terms of personal animosity and critiques. Do you feel like that's something that Wisconsin Democrats can repeat going into 2022?
Absolutely. I mean, Pat, I was in a primary for my state treasurer's race, and we ran a really positive campaign on issues, whether that was about economic security to win-win investments to improving transparency and accountability. And I'm going to run a race that's positive and focused on the issues.
Well, to that end, I was just looking at a note from the first person that we interviewed, Tom Nelson, the Outagamie County executive, who did make a somewhat of an issue of Alex Lasry's family funds. And I believe he's asked as well your own view on how much personal money will go into this race. What are your thoughts as to how expensive a primary this can be and what people will say as they examine the source of all of the candidates' donors?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to run a people-driven campaign. That's what I did as state treasurer. And that's at the heart of why I am doing this, is going to where people are. And but look, Pat, I think something that is really important to me that is part of this conversation is making sure that us as candidates refuse to take corporate PAC money. You know, I was upfront from the very beginning about how corporate PAC money, I was not going to take any of this because I want the people of Wisconsin to know that I work for them and not for special interests. And so money is going to play a big part of this. And I'm going to make sure, because the Republicans are going to do everything they can, Pat, to throw money at this problem. And I will make sure I have the funding that is needed to be successful.
I've got time for 2 quick questions here. So I'm going to ask you one that's rather pointed, and then we're going to end on a high note here. But the first is that you worked very hard to save the state treasurer's post when Republicans wanted to get rid of it. You helped save it. You ran for it. You're serving in it, but you're looking to leave after less than a term. Do you feel like you've opened yourself up to criticism that the state treasurer's post isn't as valuable as a stepping stone? What are you putting out there to make sure that that post is more than just what Sarah Godlewski saved and served in?
So I think my big goal in all this is making sure Wisconsinites know what the state treasurer should be doing for them. I mean, prior to this conversation, a lot of people weren't even aware that we had a state treasurer, and it was never about the position. It was always about the person that was leading in this office. And so whether it was our work in providing the highest distribution, I mean, this past year, $39 million to public schools, Pat, we stepped up during COVID so teachers could buy hotspots and e-learning books to address the distant learning challenges, to even our home ownership task force where we're addressing foreclosure. So to me, I think we continue to do a good job of building this race. And something that I am very cognizant of is that whoever is my predecessor has the same values and is fighting for the same things, whether that is economic security to transparency and accountability to win-win investments. And there has been a lot of interest, I think, in this race, which shows a big difference from the past.
Well, if anybody has experience running statewide and enjoying it, it's you. So I want to close by saying, somebody who's run statewide before and is going to be doing so again, what is it that is enjoyable about it? Because we know what a grind it is. So from, meeting the people to baby cheesehead to what all do you think people are going to see in you as you run for statewide office once again?
Well, I love the campaign trail, Pat. Maybe I'm crazy, but I just love meeting people where they are, whether it's at their steak fry to the Friday fish fry to drinking their favorite beer. And talking about issues that keep them up at night. And COVID has been hard because we haven't really had those experiences or opportunities. And so I'm excited that we all are going to be able to get vaccinated. And I look forward to hitting the campaign trail and traveling this state because I'm going to run a 72 county campaign. It's not just about Madison and Milwaukee. As the Western Wisconsin candidate in this race, I understand that very clearly. And we're going to be traveling all over, whether it's Ashland, Bayfield, Rhinelander, Wausau, Elk Mound, you name it, Pat. And I can't wait to meet people and have them listen to their stories.
State Treasurer and Senate candidate Sarah Godlewski, thank you again for joining us on Up North News.
Well, thanks for having me, Pat.